experience is way overrated. It's, I don't need you to have a food service background to work for me, even though most of my experiences in food service and most of my business was always in food service. I just wanted to look for somebody who would get into our culture the way we're into our culture and believe in our company the way we believe in our company, and I'll teach you the rest. And trust me, I had plenty of people that are like, you're going to open a fancy fruit place in Youngstown, Ohio? Are you crazy? And I'm like, I mean, I grew up in a town with one stoplight, so Youngstown, Ohio looked like a raving metropolis compared to what I was used to, right? Do not hire for sales skills. Hire for somebody who you don't mind spending 2 days in a row with in the car because you're with them for 8 hours a day. And if you can't get along with them, you'll never be able to coach them, and they'll never want to be coached by you. Hire for connectivity, not for skills, because if you can't teach the skills, you shouldn't be a manager anyway. We practice the platinum rule, right? We don't treat others the way we want to be treated. We treat others the way they want to be treated. And I tell people all the time, if you're really entrepreneurial, you might not be a franchisee.
All right, so this had to be one of my favorite podcast episodes that I've done. Buckle your seatbelt and ride along as I talk to Ron Taylor, who is a multi-unit franchisee who owns 9 edible arrangement stores across 3 different states, and his locations have done a combined $50 million in sales. Now, Ron held nothing back, and we walked through exactly how he grew from 1 store to 9. He literally walked me through every single store. I'm asking him questions the entire way of, well, how did you get them all built up and running? He talks about getting the very first store built out, exactly how he hired people in what sequence as he was growing his footprint and fired people. So you get to walk along the journey of his growth as we walk through location 1 through location 9. We talk about what he did to fund each location as he was building them out, because he opened up his first 3 stores in 3 years, which is very quick. Now, he also worked as the chief operating officer for a franchise called Simple Greek, which was owned by the famous Marcus Lemonis from the hit show The Prophet. And so it was really cool to hear his perspective on working with a billionaire, which is a unique opportunity. So I hope you enjoy listening and watching this episode as much as I enjoyed recording it. Now, if you want to buy a franchise in the next 12 months, you should check out my free franchise masterclass at franchiseempire.com/masterclass. And if you want to work with me and my team on finding or buying a franchise or resale business, then you can go to franchiseempire.com/check territory, and you can schedule a free call to see what's available in your area. The link is also in the description below. All right, with that said, sit back, relax, and enjoy the episode. Welcome to the Franchise Empire Show. They say Rome wasn't built in a day, and building your empire doesn't happen overnight. My name is Tarek Johnson, and owning franchises is what helped me go from employee to employer and start building my empire for my family. So this podcast is for you, the empire builders. For those of you who want to build something that stands the test of time. This is for those of you who are crazy enough to believe that you can make the dream in your head come to life. This podcast is all about bringing you real people who are building real empires so you can get inside their mind and heart and get proven strategies and actionable insights that will catapult you to build, grow, and scale your empire. All right, welcome to another episode of the Franchise Empire Show. I have Mr. Ron Taylor here. Thanks for coming on, man.
Very excited. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. So here's what stood out to me the most when I got to read your bio and some of your experience is you've owned 9 stores, franchise stores, right?
Correct. Yep.
In 3 different states. So okay, so give me a breakdown. What states were they in, and how many in each one? And then I want to talk about how in the world you managed that.
Right. So I had 5 locations in Ohio. I had 3 locations in Pennsylvania, and I had 1 location in northern West Virginia. So now, fortunately, it was only about a 2-hour drive to any of these locations, simply because where my geographical location is in Ohio, right? I'm only about 20 minutes from the Pennsylvania border. I'm only 2 hours from Morgantown, West Virginia. And I'm only really an hour to an hour and 30 minutes from that Akron-Canton kind of market. So while it was 3 states, it's a little deceptive because the drive wasn't that far.
Yeah, that's okay. That's interesting. Yeah, I recently had I recently talked to a multi-unit franchisee. He's in signal security, and he kind of has a similar setup where he's in a few different states, but I think his was like no more than a 4-hour drive, which is there's a huge difference between a 4-hour drive and a 2-hour drive.
Big.
But 2-hour drive is still big. When we there was a point where we had our store in Jacksonville, Florida, and then we moved down to Orlando, one of them, and then we saw the one in California. And that was like we had like a newborn at the time, so it still was not convenient. I'm sure you probably experienced that too, huh?
I did, but again, Midwest, I've been blessed with some really outstanding employees and team members that have stayed with me for a long time. My director of operations was with me for almost 17 years. Uh, so she was great. A couple store managers. We had one store manager that was with us over 16 years. And in my most successful location, I had 4 employees with over 12 years of tenure.
Wow, that's incredible. And I wanted to ask you about your team structure. So, well, yeah, let's dive into that first, and then I'm curious what you did to be able to retain people for that long and just kind of build up that loyalty. But give us a high level overview. So you had, 9 stores. What
Yep.
did your overall team structure look like?
Well, there was me and my wife, right, and we of course were heavily involved in the business, and we both knew it inside and out. So you had both of us, but then we had a director of operations who was a young lady by the name of Shakira Brown, who started for us in our very first store. And when she came to work for us, Tarek, it was her first job. She'd never had a job before. And she started and just had a real gift for making fruit arrangements. She was great at it. She had this great demeanor and personality, and she kind of started taking on some responsibilities of running the store, and then eventually ran one of our locations by herself. And she grew into this role of our director of operations. And oddly enough, the very first year the Edible Arrangements franchise gave a Manager of the Year award, she won it. And it was just amazing to be able to watch somebody who worked for us, who put in so much effort, who was so willing to learn and be coached and put her heart into the whole job, watch her do that. And then the founder of Edible, oddly, whose name is Tarek, even gave her a $5,000 check on stage for her performance as Manager of the Year. And it was one of the highlights of her career for sure. And definitely mine. I felt, I was so excited the year that happened to her.
That is so epic. So what did you catch her out of school? How was it her first job?
It was weird. Like she started having a family very early, very young. And at the time she came to work with me, she also had 4 children, the youngest of which was in kindergarten. So, she just wanted to get out of the house. She wanted to contribute to the family. She wanted to do something that was creative. She thought Edible would be a really good fit. And now, of course, I mean, I watched her kids grow up. I've been to all their graduation parties. You know what I mean? Like, we're basically family, right? I mean, we're essentially family at this juncture now. Her husband owns a lawn cutting service. He's a local firefighter. So it really, we were just fortunate that she came in, right? And we were blessed that she did. And we were blessed that hopefully we had a company culture that really helped, entice somebody that maybe didn't have experience. Because in my book, experience is way overrated. It's I don't need you to have a food service background to work for me, even though most of my experiences in food service and most of my business was always in food service. I just wanted to look for somebody who would basically get into our culture the way we're into our culture and believe in our company the way we believe in our company, and I'll teach you the rest.
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting hiring. So what I'm hearing you say is like really you're hiring based on personality mostly,
I,
like the softer skills.
No question, because I used to be, before I got into franchising and business, I was a manager in the pharmaceutical industry. And I had a mentor in that industry, and he said, do not hire for sales skills. Hire for somebody who you don't mind spending 2 days in a row with in the car because you're with them for 8 hours a day. And if you can't get along with them, you'll never be able to coach them, and they'll never want to be coached by you. So hire for connectivity, not for skills, because if you can't teach the skills, you shouldn't be a manager anyway. You're in the wrong role. So hire for connection, hire for personality, somebody that you can coach, and then just teach them the rest. And it's worked out.
So our team have looked into a few hundred franchises and put together a list of 5 low-cost franchises that all make $1 million or more and that have a proven track record of both happy and profitable franchisees. So if you have a net worth of at least $150,000 and you want to see if the territory that you want is still available for any of these franchises, then you can go to franchiseempire.com/check territory. All right, let's get back to the episode. That's interesting, and I like that. I like that perspective about hiring someone who you can sit in the car with for 2 hours. That's an interesting one. And actually, we just made a full-time hire for a salesperson on our team, or who will kind of be like the first point of contact and conversations with potential clients. And it was a hard decision because at the end it came down to 2 people, one who had a lot of experience in franchising, worked with franchisees, help bring people into the franchise system. But I wind up going with the less experienced person. It was a hard decision. I had to talk through it with someone else on the team for a little bit. I'm like, am I going to be making a bad decision here? But the other person, just like you said, easy to talk to, real happy, friendly, jovial. And the verdict will still be out, but I think overall, I think we made the right decision so far.
Yeah, the rule of thumb we always told our managers was to make it a little bit more tangible for them was the only way you hire somebody is if you'd be willing to sit at an airport bar next to them while you're waiting on your plane. If you're not like, because you've had that super annoying person and the person that you really found interesting as you're waiting on your airplane as you're sitting there, and we're like, if you're not comfortable sitting next to them at an airport bar, then they're not your choice. You got to go a different direction.
Yeah, interesting. So okay, so you had 9 stores in 3 states. It was you and your wife. You had your director of operations.
We did.
How did you and your wife? Were you and your wife both full time in the business?
Full time. When I started out, we got up to 3 stores before I left my job that I was working at the time and started full time with the business. So it was just my wife full time and me, basically nights, weekends. Anytime I could take time off and spend time with the business. Really one of the most joyous days of my life was the day I was able to resign from to the chagrin of my mother, right? Who was like, "Why are you leaving your great job?" To do this full time. And of course, I'd crunched the numbers every way from Sunday. But the one thing that I had missed, and I think I've heard this on some of your other podcasts too, is how much the business really grew once both my wife and I were 100% dedicated to it, right? Like there was an X factor of growth and, profitability because everything was being watched much more closely, things that I didn't necessarily anticipate. So once I went all in, it was much better. So now I'm kind of like all in on everything because I'm like, I know this is what works. Even if it doesn't work right away, I'm all in anyway. And if it fails, it fails. I'm comfortable with that, but I'm all in.
Yeah, it's an interesting point because it's such a scary moment for folks. Like I'm like you wanted to leave the corporate job, but you're like, hey, we got bills to pay, we got things, needs that need to be met. So it's hard and can be very scary to go all in the beginning. But the irony is at least what I've seen, most of the entrepreneurs that I know and I've talked to that have been successful, they've been all in their business. Like I just really haven't met anyone that's been wildly successful that's a part-time business owner. And sometimes people, especially on the online world nowadays, they'll pose it as they're working less than they are, but behind the scenes they're working their ass off.
I mean, you're always on, right? Like it's the running joke when I give people my cell phone number or something like that. I'm like, look, man, my teller windows are open 18 hours a day. Like just call or text me anytime you want. Like I don't take time off. It's even when I'm off, I'm on. So it's just the way it is.
Well, what's funny is I emailed you yesterday asking, hey, can we push it back a little bit, the recording? And I went to go find your number in our intake form to then go text you as well. And by the time I found it and did it, you had already responded to my email.
Yeah. I'm wound pretty tight. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, that's just the way I'm built. It took years for me to not hold others that work for me to that standard, right? From a culture standpoint. At first, I was probably a bit much, but you know, you start to find your way with other people. I don't demand that of the people that work for me. I mean, I'm built this way. I'm always going to be built this way. But of course, you know, if you want to keep people around for a long time, you have to understand how we practice the platinum rule, right? We don't treat others the way we want to be treated. We treat others the way they want to be treated. As opposed to the golden rule, we really try to understand what makes these people tick. So I do have some people that work for me that I can text them at 9 o'clock at night. And then I have other people where that's a hard no, right? So I know who I got to know who they are. So that's kind of how we try to handle that.
Man, it's another good point. I wanna elaborate on that, but I'm not because there's so many interesting things about you and your story that I wanna dive into. So,
Okay.
okay, so how you said that you guys had 3 stores by the time that you went full-time, but your
Yep.
wife was already full-time in the business.
Hmm.
How long did it take you to get to 3 stores? Did you open all those from scratch? Did you buy some as resales, or what did that look like?
No, the first three were from scratch, right? So we went to Discovery Day for edible, and you know, I was working in the pharmaceutical industry, so one of my drug reps had one of them, and I was like, "This is perfect," right? But now, I remember, I had a little bit of a franchising background. I was a before pharmaceuticals. I was a director of food service operations for a convenience store in southern West Virginia. So I had Arby's, Taco Bell, Subway, Godfather's Pizza, Steak Escape, and Baskin Robbins. So I was overseeing in my 20s all of that for the convenience store chain because they were all convenience store guys and they knew tobacco, cigarette, or beer, gas, but they didn't know anything about food, right? So I came in and got to look probably smarter than I actually was simply because the bar was pretty low. Um, but I got familiar with franchising. Like I was blessed. I got to go to training at Subway and I actually met DeLuca, which was fascinating, right? Like that was just an incredible moment, especially
For
given
people
just
who don't know who that is, he founded Subway.
right. Yeah. I mean, 40,000 locations, you know, I mean, like just what an operation that was and how interesting that was. So I had a background in franchising. I kind of knew what I wanted to do. So but I knew I didn't want to go full service food right away. We still had little kids. I didn't want to work every night and weekend. Right. So once I saw edible, it was a perfect fit for kind of that balance. And trust me, I had plenty of people that are like, "You're going to open a fancy fruit place in Youngstown, Ohio? Are you crazy?" And I'm like, I mean, I grew up in a town with one stoplight. So Youngstown, Ohio looked like a raving metropolis compared to what I was used to, right? So we pulled the trigger, opened it up, opened opened the second one about 11 months later, and then opened the third one. So that was 2006, then 2007, then late 2008, we opened the third one. So we kind of did them bam, 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 just like that.
Wow, that's quite fast. And what did that process look like in getting those funded? Were you using SBA loans, or how did you do that? Because typically, if you're going SBA, it's hard to do that. They typically want you to be open a year or 2 years, and you have to be making money in them. So what?
Yeah.
How did you get them open so quickly?
Luck, right? So we did the first store, right, and we got turned down by several local banks for SBA. So we ended up using like CIT, which I think's out of New Jersey or whatnot. And when we got, we had to work through a broker, and I don't even ignorance is bliss. I don't even want to know what I paid in fees because that was a long time ago. So we'll just leave it back there in the past. And they ended up, they're like, "How much money do you need?" And I'm like, "Well, I need $200,000 to get it open." And they're like, "Nope, that's not enough. We're giving you $300,000." And it was 2006. And I think, I laugh about people who complain about interest rate right now because I was at 10.75. I was like prime plus 2 3/4 or something like that. So I'm like, okay, I didn't know any better. I'm like, "I'll take it." So I opened the store, and of course, I got 100 grand left over because I opened this. I mean, I did most of the work myself. I'm in there hanging sheetrock, like I'm laying
Oh,
tile.
really?
Oh
Oh,
yeah,
interesting.
oh yeah. Like I'm doing this on a budget, right? My rent. I mean, I took 1,118 square feet in my first edible location, and I was only paying $900 a month in rent. Welcome to the Midwest.
Wow.
Welcome to the Midwest, right? So I found this old hair salon. I did all the demo myself with my next door neighbor who's a high school kid, which long story short, he's one of the people that bought me out which is a great story, right? But so we got it open for next to nothing. We had an extra $100,000. So I'm like, Dad, what do I do? He's like, just hold on to it. So I put it in a savings account. And this one went so well right out of the get-go. Then I went to a local bank and said, hey, if I put in $100,000, will you fund $100,000? And they're like, sure. So I was able to do that conventional, right, with the extra money that I had left over. Got the second one up and running, and it was terrible. It was a dog. It was awful. But I had the wrong leadership team. I knew it. I put the wrong leaders in there. That store was losing me money, and it was in a much better location. I thought it was going to be amazing, right? And it right, terrible. So I literally, after 4 months, I realized I got the wrong people. So I hire an entire new staff, bring them to Youngstown and train them while that store is still operating. And I show up one day and let everybody go and insert a new team. All one handed everybody their checks and sent every single person in the store went. Everybody.
That is crazy. What a genius move, though. Train them in one place and then boom.
Yeah. I mean, I'm reimbursing them mileage and everything like that, but I'm like, I don't care. I have to get this right. And that store turned around immediately and obviously became the better performer because it was over in the Akron market.
So what was the difference? Let's unpack this a little bit for folks that don't not all folks will have the business sense that you have where it's they may go, well, maybe it's just the wrong area or maybe the demand's not there. Or how do you realize and know that it's the team that's the issue?
Because I hired a bad leader and the leader hired bad people. Like it was 100%.
What were the signs of it though? Like how did you know that?
The person wouldn't show up on time. Like they were constantly like leaving the store for different reasons. They weren't in touch with the guest, right? Like they weren't touching guests and they weren't touching guest complaints and they weren't making sure the workflow and the day went correctly. They just weren't guest service oriented. I mean, that's the beauty of franchising, right? Like we have the playbook. We know what needs to be done. I mean, it's fruit on a stick. Like it's not rocket science. What separates great franchisees from not so great franchisees is how committed are you to the level of service that you provide for every single guest? Because that's the differentiator, right? Like I always quote Days of Thunder. I'm like, I don't get beat by other cars. I only get beat by other drivers. So that's franchising, right? Like everybody gets the same ops manual, but not everybody treats that ops manual with the same level of respect, and they don't treat their guests with the same level of respect. We are 100% in on service. I mean, I am maniacal about it. Like I'm crazy about it. Like still to the very last day I owned Edible Arrangements, I touched every guest that had a complaint, everyone. Personally.
Hey, so if you want to figure out if you should buy a franchise and learn the fastest and easiest way to figuring out the best franchise to buy and everything you need to know about the process, then you'll want to go get access to our Franchise Buyers Academy. In our Franchise Buyers Academy, you'll get a behind-the-scenes look into specific franchises and exactly how much money they are making. You'll get simple formulas for finding money-making franchises and a blueprint on how to scale them into a franchise empire that can be sold for a lot of money later on. You'll be able to finally answer the question on, should I buy a franchise? Now you can get access at franchiseempire.com/FBA. Now let's get back to the episode. Wow. Over 9 stores. That's that's incredible. See, yeah, this is what, when I talk to people like you who've been successful as whether franchisees or entrepreneurs, it's inspiring. I love it. Like just having this conversation makes me so happy and just kind of learning your story and being able for other people to be able to hear it and understand the DNA and the wiring of what it takes. Because listening to you is like a hack, right? Someone who's just getting into franchising or just wanting to buy a franchise. It's like, oh, okay. I now kind of have the model of how I need to show up and operate, et cetera. But this is more and more. I don't know how much you hear or see the world of kind of franchise buyers overall, but so many people, they're like, I want something passive. I want to, be semi-absentee. I want to make passive income. And it just always makes me nervous when that's the mindset that someone's going into it with, because I'm like, man, you're kind of destined to, if you're trying to go into it to work less, unless you're long-term focused and you know that you won't work less until maybe 5 or 7 years and after you got a team and everything, like you're kind of putting yourself in a position to fail because you're gonna work more for a lot longer.
Passive income is for real estate. Right. I mean, and even that is sometimes not that passive, right? But I mean, like, you can't own a franchise and expect it to be passive income, especially at the beginning. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, 10, 12, 14 years into my career with like a great team in place and everything like that, like, I mean, there were probably stores, if I showed up, they would have thought I was a guest, right? They wouldn't have even known who I was. Like, they would have been like, "Hey, how can I help you today?" Like, no, I'm the owner. But that's because I had an infrastructure of people that were, doing that and doing that culture. But that took a long time. I mean, I joke with everybody. I'm like, I'm the CEO, but on the holidays, I'm literally in the dumpster jumping on the trash to try to make more room for boxes for all the strawberries that we had to put in there on Valentine's Day. So, it's not glamorous, but it's great, right? It's amazing. I love franchising. Like, I love it. I think it's one of the best tools to be able to be in business and build wealth and level the playing field. But you have to work. You don't have to be a genius. Like, you don't need a 34 ACT or anything like that, or a 200 IQ. You just have to be willing to put the work in.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, so you open that second store, you then got that turned around with the team in place. And so what? Just how did putting the right team increase the performance of the store?
Well, we put in the right team that was willing and dedicated to be there. I mean, this was an hour away from my house, right? So I needed people that were going to, exemplify the culture and the desire for customer service that we put in, and we feel like we found that in that new manager, and she did a great job and was with me for years and really scaled that store, and gave me the opportunity to open the third store, which that was now my first venture out of the state. That was over in Pennsylvania. So we left Ohio and went to Pennsylvania, and we let Shakira, who was, the manager of the year, we let her run that store autonomously by herself as part of her growth and development. So then we were going from there, and then we get ready to build. We build store number 4, which is a couple years later in early 2011. And literally right after we get it open, we get a phone call from the owner in Morgantown, West Virginia, who's a lady, a little older lady. And she was like, "This is harder than I thought it was going to be. I don't want to do it anymore. Do you want the store?" And I'm like, I went to school at West Virginia, right? You can see all the West Virginia paraphernalia behind me here. So, my wife and I both went to college there. So that's an emotional thing for us. We're like, heck yeah, we want it. We're like, "How much do you want for it?" And she says, "Whatever I owe on it." And I said, "That's a deal. You got yourself a deal." So I didn't even know what that was. I didn't know what the number was, but I knew it was fair, right? Like, I'm like, I'll take it. So I liquidated my 401k that I had from my old job to buy the store.
And you cash it out? You didn't even do like a Rob's plan? You just cashed it out and took the
Cashed it
penalty
out,
and everything?
took the hit, and just bought it.
Did you know that the Rob's plan existed where you can like roll it into
Probably not. I
yeah,
mean, obviously I didn't, right? Because I didn't do it. I just was like, here I go, full steam ahead.
man. That's wild. Okay, so interesting. So I have a couple of questions then to unpack from there. So, in the instance, because turnarounds or underperforming stores can be very hard and difficult to really, you're fighting inertia, right? In getting something turned around. So the second store, when you put the right team in place, how do you then rebuild the sales and the marketing to grow it?
Derek, here's the beautiful thing about edible arrangements, right? Is it was so e-commerce heavy that even though your store started out poorly performing, people weren't necessarily really connected to that store, right? They're more connected to the product. So it's not like when you have this crappy restaurant, right? And they've been, bad service, and everybody knows, or which crappy Dunkin' Donuts, which one it is, and you drive by it to go to the other one because they never get your drink right. They're not connected to edible quite that way, right? It's a little different. It's people see it as like an e-commerce business, almost a little bit more than a brick and mortar. So fortunately for me, fixing it wasn't that hard. Like once I got the right team in place and they actually answered the phone and took the orders and delivered them the right way, like, and that's 2008, man. Edible had a lot of talk about inertia. They had a lot of inertia moving in the right direction. Like we start national television advertising like right about that time, and we'd never been on TV before. So as much as I'd love to take a ton of credit for that, I was in the right place at the right time with the right brand. And that really helped. All I had to do was put the people in place that were dedicated to service and dedicated to culture, which we did. The rest of it kind of took care of itself.
Wow, interesting. So you're now at store number 4. It's you and your wife running the business. You have your now at this point when you're 4 stores in, do you have any sort of manager that's overseeing multiple locations at a time, or that's what you and your wife are doing?
Not yet. Like it's just me and my wife at this time. Cause I mean, we didn't want to overextend ourselves because, we're servicing debt, at that point and everything like that. So we're just, we're just putting a lot of miles on a vehicle. That's pretty much what we're doing at that juncture.
And how did you and your wife divide up the duties? Was it like clear roles in terms of like, hey, I'm going to handle operations, you handle marketing, or so, or was it just kind of just do whatever needed to be done? Like, what did that look like based on just you guys' skill sets and strengths and kind of
Yeah.
backgrounds?
Yeah. The tangible operations, like the building of the arrangements, like those in-store operations, that was my wife, right? Like she really had a good handle on like flow of the day and how things need to go. Because the most critical thing in an edible is like, how do you prioritize the arrangements and how do they go out the door with the delivery drivers? What's going to a business? What's going to a school? What's going to a residence? Like who made a request for an early delivery? Just kind of that whole daily flow. She would manage that. Global operations like planning for holidays and things like that, which that was more me. And that is critical, right? That's where edible is such a different animal. Like, on February 8th, the store would do 25, 30 orders. On February 14th, it would do 800 orders, right?
How
You got
did
to,
you plan? How did you plan for something like that?
we
How do
started,
you even handle that?
we start planning the day after Christmas. I mean, trust me, at first it was a struggle figuring that out because the goal was to get to never turn off. My first Valentine's Day, we only got to act like 200 orders and we had to shut off. But I'm like, wait a minute, we're shutting off when all the demand is there. Like, what are we doing? We can't do that because I could have done tens of thousands of more dollars in business if I was prepared. So we had to shift the paradigm there. The franchise helped, right? They went to like a limited menu on major holidays. But I mean, like the week of Valentine's Day, the week of Mother's Day, I did 22.5% of my annual revenue in those 14 days.
My goodness.
Yeah. And we prepared for it, right? And then of course you're scared to death it's going to snow on Valentine's Day because it's February 14th, right? So you're terrified. You just need it not to snow that day. Like it can snow any other day, just don't snow on February 14th. Because my busiest store on February 14th at the end, when we really had it figured out, we would do 1,000 orders in one day. Six
Wow.
600 deliveries. 600 deliveries.
That's crazy. So what would you do? What would you hire just temporary people and
Yep.
like how did
Yeah, we bring in 30 delivery drivers and we'd start knocking on doors at 7:30 a.m. Because
and
you got to be, you had to be.
how do you find 30 delivery drivers and how do you get them trained for that day?
Well, you bring them in a little bit early and give them just kind of a rundown, but like you're basically doing everything for them, right? All they're literally doing is dropping the orders off and getting a signature because I've got expediters, I've got people that log all their tickets, I've got people that put all their attachments on all their orders, and these are skilled people, right? Like, so that was the challenge with Edible, right? Is you had relatively small staffs and you only had X amount of talent, and how you had to deploy that talent on those major holidays really took a lot of thought, right? Because you had to give the talent the non-talent and they had to kind of coach the non-talent and teach them, right? So, you had one talented chocolate dipper and they had 6 people at their disposal and they had to teach them how to dip a chocolate covered strawberry, which isn't that hard, right? I mean, we'd bring them in a few days early. We'd burn the payroll when we didn't really need them because it was just like training dollars. But then you're making up for it on the back end because you're doing $65,000-$70,000 on Valentine's Day in revenue in one day.
That's
It,
that's insane. That's
it's
so
the
cool.
craziest thing you've ever seen. You've never seen. I bought strawberries by the pallet. By the pallet. That's 125 flats of berries. I'd buy them by the pallet.
Wow, that sounds like a logistical and operational nightmare, but the the carrot at the end of it sounds pretty
Right.
exciting though.
It was a nightmare until you started to get it figured out. Then it was like getting ready to play in the Final Four, right? Like you're all geeked up. You're getting ready for Valentine's Day. You're getting ready for Mother's Day. Mother's Day is the best in my opinion because you don't have to worry about the weather. Like you just take that X factor out of the picture, but you're getting geeked up for it. And then when you're able to service every guest, and there's the guy that walks in at 7:30 at night and he needs something and he thinks you're going to be wiped out, and you still got a cooler full of flowers and chocolate strawberries and fruit arrangements, and he's like, you really have stuff left? And you're like, absolutely, I have stuff left, there is no question. Right. So it is, and you walk out of there and you fulfilled every order and you successfully delivered every order, and you have maybe one or two guest connections. That's what we call our complaints. It is such a sense of accomplishment, and to do it in 9 different locations, it really makes you feel really proud of what your team can do and what they can accomplish and everything like it. It's like winning a national championship for me.
Oh, I'm sure. So, okay, so you go from then 4 stores to at what point did your strategy have to change and your team structure have to change as you then scaled to 9 stores?
once I added Morgantown, and now I'm 2 hours away from my farthest location, and it's kind of an outlier. I had to put That's when we kind of put Shakira in that role of overseeing, because there wasn't enough bandwidth between me and my wife to get all of these locations and coach them to the degree at which they needed to be, especially on holidays. So we had to start creating like some middle management.
Okay, so you put her in the director of ops role, and how many stores was she overseeing at that point? And what did your then role and focus shift to?
Well, she was really overseeing them all, right? Like we wanted everybody to get comfortable with talking to her, with letting her run them. So we bought her a car, right? We gave her a company vehicle, gave her a significant increase in pay, and just really let her, and we would go with her a lot, right, to help her kind of coach her through that process, because there was a mind shift from running one store to running like multiple stores, adapting her personality to the different personality of 5 different managers as opposed to just one team in one store. But she was up to the challenge. She was great. Really listened and understood, and we gave her some things to read about adapting her personality style and things of that nature. So she did really great. And once we knew we had her in place, then of course my mindset, I was like, well, hell, let's just go get a couple more, right? Let's figure this out. And I'm like, we're driving all the way to Morgantown. We're passing right through Pittsburgh. I've heard that this one old owner in Pittsburgh is thinking about exiting. So I just cold called her and was like, hey, you interested in selling your 2 stores? And that's how we ended up with Pittsburgh.
Wow. And so what happened there? Does she just says, "Yes, I wanna sell," or you
Yes.
gotta.
Yeah, no, she was pretty interested. She wanted to exit. Her daughters were, one was in college, one was getting ready to graduate, and they wanted to move back to the South. So it was kind of perfect timing for us. So we ended up negotiating a deal, and it was a pretty formidable dollar amount, and it was post economic collapse, so I couldn't get the money together. So she seller financed it for me. I
All
gave
of
her
it?
No, I gave her a pretty formidable down payment. I gave her a pretty solid down payment. She carried the rest at a 7%, 7.5% interest rate. And then of course my CPA and a couple other people, they're like, you're paying a premium for this store. And I'm like, no, I'm not really paying a premium for this store. I'm paying for what the store is doing right now. Trust me, when I take it over, it's going to do 20 to 30% more. I'll guarantee you.
And so how did you grow it to do 20 to 30% more?
I showed up and let everybody go
Oh, you did that again?
again.
Wow. And
Yeah.
did you hire and train the like, how did you do that
No,
logistically?
we pieced it together with existing people that we had, right? So I was paying for mileage and hotel rooms and everything like that while we staffed that store up quickly. I mean, that was back, you could hire staff a little quicker back then. It's not like today with some of the challenges you have for staffing. So, we let a couple people stay, but eventually everybody went, right? Because we bought the stores in December and we bought two of them. And one of them, it was a high performing location, right? It was doing for edible, it was doing like almost 780 grand, which was a pretty solid edible at the time. I think average unit volume at that time was about 450, 500. And so this was a high performing store. But then by the time we got done with it, it was at almost $1 million.
Wow.
So those stores performed. I mean, they were a ton of work. My wife and I were in Pittsburgh all the time. I mean, I could drive to Mount Lebanon blindfolded. My wife's from Pittsburgh, so that helped a little bit. We had a store in Robinson Township, which was right out near the airport. That store, when we took it over, only did 450,000 when we bought it, and then at the end of our first year of owning it, did $600,000. So we increased it that much in just 1 year.
That's incredible. And did you guys have kids? Do you guys have kids?
We did. Yeah.
How were you managing the chaos of all these stores, all the traveling, family time? Did you have specific strategies in place? Like how'd that work?
I mean, I think we did a pretty good job of managing it, again, because we had such good infrastructure in the existing stores that we already had. When we took those Pittsburgh stores on, we could kind of hyper focus our energies there and make sure that we had. But I mean, also our kids didn't know anything but us being in business. That was the only thing that they knew. So, while they were not necessarily working in the business, they understand that this was a family that ran a business, and the business was a member of the family. Just like the dog is a member of the family, right? We treat the dog with the same level of love and respect that we treat the kids, and we treat the business exactly the same way. The business is a family member, and everybody in this house knows it.
That's an interesting, a really, really interesting perspective. I've never heard anyone describe it like that. Yeah, that's really, yeah, that's really interesting. Because my wife and I are both entrepreneurs, and our son just turned 5. Our
Mhm.
2-year-old, she's not going to understand the concept of business yet, but he knows that mommy and daddy, are entrepreneurs and go to work, and we try to explain as much as we can to him and how. He's really into money. We try to teach him about money. He loves to do chores, which is crazy. We'll see how long that lasts.
That's awesome.
Uh, so, we'll say, I'll just, as a heads up, I'll say, let's say he gets a blanket. Caleb, do you know this blanket costs money? It does? How much does it cost? Yeah. Well,
Right.
this blanket costs, $15. And well, what else costs money? Does, it'll point to something else. Does that cost money? Yeah. And like, so when mommy and daddy are going to work, like we're working to make money and help other people so that we can, buy these things. And you can just see kind of the wheels in his head, like turning, trying to understand it. I'm sure he's only grasping some of it, but it's starting to click. But we definitely try to talk to him about it. But I like that perspective of like the business is a member of the family. I'm going to recycle that.
That's
I'm going to
great.
recycle that and start using that.
Yeah.
I'll quote you when I do that.
You don't have to give me credit. You can steal it as your own. It's perfectly fine. I do it all the time. So, but yeah, we always tried to really teach and the thing about it is we were blessed, right? We had a very good infrastructure of people. My kids don't ever remember me not being at their events, right? My son was a high school basketball player. I never missed a game. Now, I might not be around after the game was over. I might have to go back to work because, right, February is basketball season. So I might be there, and as soon as the buzzer goes off, I'm leaving. Text my son, "Great game, love you." I'm back at work, right? Like I had to go back, but we just always wanted the kids to understand that we're blessed. We're blessed to have people that put their heart and soul into that, and we got it. By treating the business as a family member, we're essentially treating the people that work for the business as though they're very important to us.
Mm. Yeah, interesting, fascinating. Okay, so so we'll fast forward a little bit. You scaled to
Yep.
nine locations.
Mm-hmm.
At what point do you decide that you want to start exiting and selling? And do you just sell it to one individual or group at the
Right.
same time, or how does that process work?
Well, then we decided, hey, I was looking at edible and I'm like, I don't like all my eggs in one proverbial basket. Let's diversify. So we ended up opening 3 restaurants, right? So we opened 3 Simple Greek fast casual restaurants, which the Simple Greek was a brand that came from a television show called The Prophet with Marcus Lemonis, right? The CNBC show The Prophet. So we ended up buying into that brand and buying a multi-store deal with some partners, some very good friends of ours, and um, we went to that, and it was a very, very emerging brand, right? So I was like, okay, not only are we going to be able to do this, I think, well locally, I think we're going to be able to play a role in the shape of the brand with my level of experience in food service and everything like that. I'm going to be able, which I was fine with, right? I knew they weren't going to have a lot of stuff figured out. I was very comfortable with it, very open that, we weren't going to get an unprecedented level of support from a brand new brand. So at the time we opened our first store for the Simple Greek, which was right here in Youngstown, we the busiest the store had ever been in the opening week. The busiest week they'd ever had was about $30,000. We opened our first week and did $56,000 in revenue in our first week. So we blew it out the box. We crushed it. I'm literally rewriting the recipes and ops manuals like on the fly to try to keep up with demand. It was nuts. It was
How did you
crazy.
guys get the word out? I mean, because that's all, sales and marketing really. So what was you guys' strategy for that?
Listen, man, Youngstown is great. Like Youngstown business is like New Hampshire politics. It's retail, right? Like if you want to get a vote in New Hampshire, you go stand at the town dump and you shake hands, right? You don't need a big ad buy. Youngstown business is exactly the same way, right? We had billboards, we had countdown clocks on the billboards to when we were opening. We were doing tons of events and giving away free food leading up to the opening. And of course, the franchise is like, you need a soft opening. I'm like, nah, that's overrated. We're not doing soft openings. We're opening the first day, and literally, I'm going to see who in my staff is what they're made out of, because they're going to get punched in the face the first day. And we're just going to see how it goes, right? Because I hired 45 people. I knew 15 or 20 of them were going to work out anyway. So I might as well, like, let's figure this out right away. And I had that place staffed. It looked like a Chick-fil-A, right? I had people standing elbow to elbow on the line. We had a line out the door. We're just cranking out business, and it was a ton of fun. I mean, it was a blast. So we did that, and we didn't care. We were like, we're going to open up. If we make a mistake, we're going to apologize. We're going to give people a coupon. We're going to, give them their money back. We're going to do whatever, but we're going to come out of the gate and we're just going to go crazy.
That's wild. So and at that point in time, you still had the 9 edible stores.
Yeah. Yeah. Now I put a second, person in to help Shakira, to help support Shakira. So she had that. And this was like 2016, 2017. So we had the 3 stores, and now we started to divest, right? We decided to sell the Pittsburgh locations for edible just because it was becoming a little bit much. But we were able to sell the Pittsburgh locations and do pretty well on that deal. And then I started paying off debt and everything like that.
How do you find the buyers to like do you list it with the business broker? Do you sell it on your own, or?
I did. I used a broker for all of my edible sales, with the exception of a couple. We Hermitage, for instance, the third store that we opened, it got to the end of its 10-year life. And we thought to ourselves, hey, we can service this market out of Youngstown. We can just buy an extra delivery van rather than, renew the franchise agreement and have the overhead of another location. So we can consolidate that business in Youngstown. And of course the franchise is like, we might relight the location. I'm like, good luck. Like, if you can find a buyer, go get it, right? Like, they didn't. I mean, they've never relit that location. I kind of knew that. I didn't think that it's not enough population to necessarily justify it, given the new age expense of being in business.
And that was the one where you're paying $900 a rent on?
No, that was my very first one. And that was Youngstown. Once Youngstown got to the end of 10 years, I'm like, okay, I live here. It's a great store. I'm buying a building. So I went up the street and bought a 2,500 square foot building on a quarter-acre lot and got it for like $230,000 and gutted it to the studs and literally rebuilt it from scratch. And it was the new edible arrangements, and it had a drive-through window, right? So the building had a drive-through window, and I'm like, hey, this is awesome. I'm going to have a drive-through window. And the franchise is like, we don't have a footprint for a drive-through window. And I'm like, well, you will when I'm done, because here we are, we're doing it. And so, benefits of being, a relative, a relevant franchisee in the brand, they gave me some latitude with some things. So we ended up opening that store. And, never in a million years could I foresee how beneficial a drive-through window would be in a pandemic. Right.
Mm.
Yeah, that was luck, not planned, right? So, long story short, the Youngstown store, like 44,000 cars a day drive by the location. It's right across from the mall. It's in one of the best spots, and I got the building cheap because the ingress and egress is a little tough, but ingress and egress for me really is only a big deal on like Valentine's Day, Christmas, and Mother's Day, because most people don't come to the store, they get it delivered. So the ingress and egress is my problem, and I pay by the hour, so who cares? And so we just, that store was the number one franchise store in the system 20, 21, 22, and 23.
Wow. Yeah, it's crazy how much drive-throughs will help performance overall. I know there was in our system there was one drive-through store, and it was a guy who he had been a general contractor for 20, 25 years. All he did was build out QSRs. He
Mm-hmm.
had built out for 20 or 30 franchisees in the system. He became a franchisee himself. He owned a bunch of other QSR franchises. And I guess similar thing where he just decided he wanted to have a drive-through. And and he performed quite well. And then we looked through with some of the content that we make. I'll make shorts about different franchises, how much money they make, how much they cost to get open, and when you look in the FTD, all of the Dunkin' stores with drive-throughs have their sales are 30%, 35% higher
Right.
than traditional stores, which is fascinating. Just a simple concept. Just make it easier for people and you'll
Yep.
sell more.
I know. It's crazy.
Yeah, that's
So,
pretty cool. Okay, so then you wind up doing the Simple Greek in 3 locations. So and then what happened there with that franchise?
well, we were doing well. We opened a second store, and it kind of came out of the gates as well as the first store. And then they wanted us to open a third store, and we're like, I mean, I'm already busy, right? I'm like, nah, we don't really want to eject the capital. The two stores are doing well. We're happy with where we're at. And they were like, well, you'll partner with Marcus. Marcus will fund it. You'll run it. And I'm like, okay. So we did that. Little did we know it was a little bit of an experiment on Marcus's part, because after we did that for a little while, he came to me and he gave me a call, which is funny. I got called by a billionaire, right? It's pinched me a little bit. It's a little surreal. And he was like, "Look, I'm changing the entire direction of the brand. I want you to take over the brand. I want you to take over. I want you to be the chief operating officer of the brand. I want you to fix what you think isn't working, and I want to get this moving in the right direction." And I was thrilled, right? I was super excited. I've always wanted to, take a stab at that, see what it's like to work from the franchisor side of things, because I thought I knew it, right? Like, I'm like, I'm a great franchisee. Of course I can be a franchisor. Bro, being a franchisor is hard, man. Like, damn. Like, wow. Once I got in there and realized how complicated distribution is, and working with vendors, and franchisee, it humbled me for sure. Like, it is. And then you're just getting started. I started in October, and then March, blam, pandemic. Like, you're
Oh,
shut down.
wow.
Yeah, we got crushed, right? So we gave everybody royalty relief in the system. Like, Marcus didn't charge anybody royalty starting like April 1st of, the year the pandemic started. And we never reinstituted royalties ever. Like, I had to lay people off. I was basically working for free because I committed to it, so I wanted to do it and make sure that things had to get done. And then eventually, I went to Marcus and I was like, "Look, we're either going to have to spend some money fixing some of this stuff, like you're going to be out several million, and getting everything really worked out, or we got to look to sell this to a brand that can provide some infrastructure for these franchisees, because we have to treat them with respect. Like, they put their life on the line for this." And I ended up negotiating a deal with WowWorks to sell them the entire brand. That was Kelly Roddy and those guys over at Wow. They owned Salad Works, Zoop, Barbaritos, Garbanzos, and then Fruitables, right? They had those brands. They didn't have all of those at the time, but then they acquired the Simple Greek, which was much better for the franchisees. And then they ended up buying my stores as corporate stores, and that put me out of the restaurant business, which I'm not sad that I'm out of the restaurant business. That restaurant business is hard. But yeah, it was super interesting working directly with a billionaire and kind of seeing how that comes to light, and really understanding the franchisor side of things. And as you know, as a successful franchisee, I think a lot of us sit and armchair quarterback franchisors thinking that we like, oh, what do you mean you can't get us the product or what? I mean, like, it's very easy for us to sit on the sidelines and judge. Well, I lived that for a little while, and it gave me a newfound respect for how challenging it can be to be a franchisor. It's not easy.
And so speaking of franchisors, so you're now again a franchisor, right? Did you start your own franchise system, or what do you do, or what are you doing now?
My wife and I started our own business. We started a local charcuterie board business. And we're nowhere near being a franchisor. Like, we've got tons of work to do, tons of systems to put in place. I mean, we definitely began with the end in mind to try to think about, like, if this could become a franchise system, how do
Oh,
we
so
do
you guys
it?
haven't franchised it?
No.
Oh, okay. I thought you had.
No, I can't. I mean, I love, like, some of the people that have been on your podcast and several others that talk about this level of treating franchisees with respect. I think it is the new mindset in franchising. I think we're going to see a wholesale shift of franchisees only buying into systems where they feel like they really get concierge level service from their franchisor. And there's so much work to be done on our end to make sure that the unit level economics are there in, like, the first store. And even if I did franchise it, I probably would only take on 2 or 3 franchisees, get them up and running, make sure their unit level economics are good before I would ever try to do something on a massive scale. Because I've been there, right? I know how daunting it was to borrow $200,000 or $300,000 the very first time when I didn't have anything. And I put my heart and soul into it. So there's so much that I would have to do before we would ever actually franchise it to anybody, because I that's the only level of respect that I could ever see myself treating anybody that would be willing to put their faith in something that I create.
Yeah, doing it responsibly, kudos, because there's a lot of there's a lot of folks that, man, they wind up becoming franchisors, or they have one unit, they rush into franchising the business, and it's just I share the same perspective, which is, you have like a responsibility. It's what's crazy to me is that there are franchisors out there where they're barely making any money or not making money in their one location that they created their brand. And for whatever, and I think it comes from the best intentions, because they're going out there thinking, oh, this could be a thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're seeing the possibility, but not realizing they're going and franchising the business. They're undercapitalized. They have no idea how to run a franchise system. Now you have other people putting their life savings into a model that never was proven, and it has a foundation. And then from the other side, we see it all the time. Franchise buyers get way too emotional, and they have an experience at this local place that they go to, and they go, I want to buy a franchise. The owner said I could be the first franchisee. What, this will be so great and amazing. And man, with the amount of times you try to talk people off the ledge of that conversation, it's like, the reason why you buy a franchise is because you're buying into a proven model and template. And outside of that, there's no circumstance where it really makes sense. You're signing a 10-year agreement, you're personally guaranteeing, and you don't even know if the shit works.
Right. And that's what's great about what you do, right? Like, hopefully people are availing themselves of the resource of bringing in a professional. Like, I love what you do. Like, I do that for free for people all the time if they call me, like, on a much, much smaller scale. Right. And really try to, but what you're doing is great, because it's giving them, an understanding and an insight into exactly that, right? Like, don't make an emotional decision, right? Like, and I tell people all the time, if you're really entrepreneurial, you might not be a franchisee, like, because you got to follow the playbook. Like, That's my first rule. Like, if you're going to be a franchisee, then be a franchisee, right? I mean, don't get me wrong. At Edible, we created some mechanisms in the store that weren't necessarily coached by the brand to execute on like Valentine's Day or things like. But bro, I did what the franchise told me to do. I paid a lot of money for the book. Do what the book tells you to do. You're not, if you can invent a better mousetrap, then go hang your own shingle and be that guy or that gal, right? Like, God bless you. You're amazing, right? So, but if you want to be a franchisee, and I feel like I can walk that line, right? Like, I've started this own concept of ours, and we're navigating it, and we're changing, and we're ebbing, and we're flowing, and we're figuring out. I've also signed up to be a sweat house franchisee. I'm going to do exactly. I'm gonna do exactly what Jamie Weeks tells me to do, because that's what I'm just doing. What he owns 152 Orange Theories. I'm doing what he says.
Wow. Man, I love it. Well, all right, we got to run, but I have a feeling this is part one, because I want to do a part two. There's so many other things that I wanted to hit on and ask and talk to you about. So we're gonna have to do a part
Yeah.
two at some point. But before we wrap, the name of the podcast is the Franchise Empire Show. When you think about your experience in franchising overall, what does the term franchise empire mean to you?
Well, for me, like, it really, creating a franchise empire for me was control over my own destiny, right? Like, to give me the flexibility of the time with my family. I've never missed anything important ever. And I don't think, if I was working for somebody else, I'm not 100% sure I could say that, right? Like, so, I think for me, it's the same as it is probably for you and a lot of other people. It really gave me the time to do what I wanted to do and what I loved. But I love working. I love being a part of a franchise system. I love that almost as much as I love my kids, right? So, like, it's not, my family's always one, but my business was always 1A, because it gave me the ability to put family one, right? That empire, that 9-store enterprise, those, additional 3 restaurants and everything that we did, and even selling them, at the right time, gave me all of that opportunity. So, it's hard at first, right? Like, you might take a little bit of, maybe a step backwards for a short period of time, but if you're dedicated to the craft and you trust the process, then you can build it into that empire and really give yourself, both the time and financial freedom that probably most people are looking for when they get into business in the first place.
Boom. I love it, man. Ron, thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me. It's appreciated. I'm looking forward to, I have a sneaky suspicion you and I might be texting or talking in the future. So don't ever hesitate to hit up my cell. I think what you're doing is great, and I love listening to the show.
100%. Yeah, thanks, man. I appreciate it. Hey, before we go, thank you so much for listening to this episode. Please subscribe here on YouTube if you haven't already. And the biggest thank you that you could ever give me is to share this episode with someone who you think will benefit. That means that we can share this message with more people and hopefully positively inspire them like we have you. So thank you. And until next time, go build your empire.